Silicon Valley, California. Known worldwide as the center of high-tech innovation, home to dozens of global iconic brand names. In Silicon Valley, technology, brainpower, and venture capital merged to create disruptive technology-based revolutions, including the microchip, the personal computer, the internet, and wireless communications. The spark that ignited Silicon Valley's explosive growth can be traced back to a dispute that occurred in this building at 391 San Antonio Road, Mountain View. 8 young scientists quit their jobs at a transistor laboratory run by William Shockley. In Silicon Valley lore, they became known as the Traitorous Eight. The New York Times called it one of the top 10 days that changed history. The date, September 18, 1957. The 8 young men who quit their job that day were hand-picked by William Shockley. In the electronics world of the 1950s, William Shockley was a giant. Shockley managed the team that included John Bardeen and Walter Brattain, the Bell Lab scientist who discovered the transistor in 1948. With funding from Arnold Beckman, a wealthy scientist-turned-businessman, Shockley established the Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory in 1955. Shockley went against Beckman's recommendation to set up in Southern California, near Beckman's own company, and established the lab near his hometown of Palo Alto.
The people at Bell Labs did not want to go back and work underneath him in a new company out on the West Coast, so Shockley then was faced with having to recruit people from all over the country, and he did a wonderful job.
Robert Noyce, who would later go on to found Intel, remembers the day he answered the phone, and Shockley was on the line. It was like getting a call from God, he said.
I had given a couple of papers. Bill Shockley had heard of them, or had been in the audience, and invited me to come out and join his organization out in Palo Alto.
Dr. William Shockley thought he needed a chemist in a new operation he was setting up, and gave me a call one evening to see if I would be interested in talking to him about that possibility.
This was November of '55. He'd hired then 2 people. I was the 3rd one he was considering hiring. He said, you have passed our test with flying colors, and I hope you will wish to join my project at a starting salary of $675 a month. I was told by the Bell Labs people, said, you don't know what you're getting into working with Shockley. But I thought, well, California is where I want to live, and whatever happens, it's going to be an interesting time.
Typically, people could work for Shockley for about a year. They were really intelligent, top-notch people who could be running their own company, like most of these people were. The bloom was off the rose after about a year.
Every Monday morning, we have a technical meeting in his office, all jammed together, and at the end of the meeting, and each one are assigned certain job to do, and by noon he said, "How's it coming along?" So people getting sort of, some of the people just couldn't take it. It was just, he's too anxious to get the result.
Although the young scientists had concerns about the overbearing management style of their new boss, all sins were forgiven when Shockley, along with Brattain and Bardeen, were named recipients of the Nobel Prize for their work on the transistor.
That was a big day. The news came through by the time we got to work in the morning, so we just went and spent the day celebrating.
It started to get dicey just after he got the Nobel Prize. So we had a big celebration, and shortly thereafter he began to travel around the world rather extensively. And we'd come back with new ideas and new projects, and we never really got to finish the ones that we started with. And this got to be somewhat frustrating.
The company had been chartered initially to make transistors, to make silicon transistors using the technology of diffusion, which promised very high speed, very rugged transistors that the military were willing to pay $100 for. And he lost that vision because he really wanted to make what was called the Shockley diode, a 4-layer PN-PN diode. But they were incredibly difficult to manufacture. A 4-layer semiconductor device was almost impossible given the technology of the time. And Noyce and Moore and Last tried to tell him this, but Shockley wouldn't hear of it.
I knew trouble was brewing because Shockley was in the habit of picking on a couple of the physics guys almost frequently.
We had an incident in the laboratory where actually a little pinpoint was left in one of the doors, and a lady cut her hand on it a bit. And Shockley decided that was malicious and started trying to track down who had put this point there in order to hurt this lady.
He felt that this was sabotage and somebody was out to get him, and he started a whole program of bringing in the detectives with lie detectors, and that was really off the wall. We didn't take too kindly to that kind of thing at all.
Everything began to come to a head in May of 1957 when Arnold Beckman, the head of Beckman Industries, came up for a meeting. And in fact, Shockley Semiconductor had been running in the red for a year and a half at that point. Beckman came up to discuss what to do, principally how to get control of these R&D costs. And right in the middle of that meeting, with all of his senior staff there, Shockley jumped up and shouted out, "If you don't like the way I'm running things, I can take this group and get funding anywhere else," and then stormed out of the room.
We use that as a reason to actually call Beckman and say, hey, that's not true. If Shockley tried to move here, he'd have to go almost by himself. Beckman came up from Southern California, and a group of us met with him to see what steps could be taken to improve the management situation at Shockley.
Initially, Arnold Beckman was sympathetic to the group of dissatisfied researchers at Shockley Semiconductor when he met with them. I think what he was probably seeing in the financial ledger was adding substance to what the young researchers were talking about. He was spending a lot of money and probably was independently concerned about what was coming out of the organization.
He was caught up between supporting the group or supporting a Nobel Prize winner, and he originally said he would support us. Then I think he went back to Bell Labs and talked to the people and said, Shockley's more important than the group, and he, I think later on, realized that he had made the wrong decision.
Beckman's attitude toward us changed, and he essentially said, hey, Shockley's the boss, you guys like it or whatever. At that time, we felt we had burned our bridges so badly that there was no way we could stick around working for Shockley after having gone around him to try to straighten out this problem.
In the end, he backed down and decided he wasn't going to remove Shockley from his role at the laboratory. And that sort of left us, hanging in midair. The situation became untenable, and we decided that we were going to find other means of pursuing our careers in this industry.
Arnold Beckman was an independent-minded man. He may have just in the end made his decision to that he would trust in the potentials of this proven researcher, Nobel laureate, rather than a collection of much younger men.
We had all sort of moved out to Silicon Valley. We loved it out there. We didn't want to move back to, well, I'd come from Philadelphia, so forth. We wanted to see if there wasn't some way to stay in the San Francisco area.
Noyce was the sort of natural leader in the laboratory for a number of reasons, both his prior experience as somebody who had actually come up with new transistors and been involved in manufacturing them at Philco, in addition to his personality, very outgoing, very charming, very competitive personality. So already at Shockley Semiconductor, among the young researchers, Robert Noyce was a leader.
Gene Kleiner's father had had some relationship with some Wall Street firm, with some business he was running. So Gene just wrote a letter to these people, and we decided at that time to start our own company, which came as a really exciting, unknown thing for us to do.
Sherman Fairchild, a New York industrialist, was intrigued by the potential of silicon transistors. He agreed to support the group with an investment of $1.3 million to start a new semiconductor company.
Actually, Noyce didn't agree to come along until the last minute. He felt he had an obligation to stay as the technical advisor. He decided that wasn't going to work if we bail out en masse, because he didn't have anybody he knew that he could work with.
And we persuaded Bob Noyce to join the group finally, after we had got things very well set up. So the 8 of us went off and started Fairchild.
We signed an agreement, which that famous dollar bill that you saw was evidence of that. And I guess the rest is history.
Shockley noted the fateful day in a brief diary entry on September 18th.
The Trader's 8, as they call it, was a very sensitive subject, of course, because 8 key scientists leaving suddenly, and he had worked very hard to find all these people, and he was very shocked, disappointed, and saddened by the fact they all decided to leave at the same time.
Less than a month after setting up their new company, the Fairchild 8 received more good news.
Today, a new moon is in the sky, a 23-inch metal sphere placed in orbit by a Russian rocket.
Sputnik signaled the start of the space race and ultimately led to significant U.S. government contracts for silicon transistors.
We were just at the right time for making a product that the world needed, and we had the right technology, and what technology we didn't have, we developed.
William Shockley's 4-layer diode was never a commercial success, and Arnold Beckman sold the company in 1963. Some of the traitorous 8 went on to bigger and better things. Bob Noyce and Gordon Moore founded Intel in 1968, now the world's biggest chip maker. In 1972, Eugene Kleiner founded a venture capital firm that seeded such companies as Amazon.com, Google, and Sun Microsystems. Today, a sign and a small plaque in the sidewalk are the only reminders of the role that Shockley Labs played in seeding Silicon Valley.
Had Shockley located in Fullerton, next to the Beckman Instruments, or Newport Beach, where Arnold Beckman had an electronic components manufacturing operation going, then perhaps Southern California would have had an even larger part to have played an even larger part in the early semiconductor industry.
Gordon and I have speculated and given some talks on that, what would have happened if the group of us hadn't started Fairchild. How fast would have things have moved? And this is a universal thing. There's a lot of people working on a lot of stuff. It would have happened. I'm not positive it would have happened in Silicon Valley.